Imagine this. You are in a heated discussion. Your heart races, your mind fills with arguments ready to be shot like arrows. You need to respond. You need to defend yourself. You need to prove that you are right. But what if I told you that the moment you feel that desperate need to react, you have already lost? The world has taught us that strength lies in voice, in the ability to argue, to impose oneself, to always have a sharp response at the tip of the tongue. But Nietzsche saw this completely differently. For him, true power does not lie in shouting louder, nor in forcefully convincing others. True power lies in what you choose not to say. We live surrounded by noise, social media, endless debates, people competing to see who can talk the most, who has the last word. But what few realize is that in this sea of noise, those who truly have power are not shouting. They observe, they wait, and when they decide to speak, every word weighs like a stone thrown into a calm lake. Nature understood something that most ignore. The urgency to speak, to respond, to justify oneself reveals a subtle type of weakness. Those who desperately seek to be heard are deep down seeking validation. They are reacting, and those who react are being controlled. On the other hand, those who master silence possess a different kind of authority, one that does not need to prove anything to anyone. Think of the people who truly marked you. Were they the ones who spoke incessantly, or those whose few words struck you like a precise blow? Well-used silence generates mystery, generates respect, generates discomfort, and discomfort makes people think. So the question you need to ask yourself is, do you have control over your words, or are you a slave to the need to be heard? Do you know when to speak and when to simply let silence do the work for you? Because the truth is that sometimes silence is not just a choice. It is a challenge that few have the strength to face. Today we will explore how Nietzsche viewed the power of silence and how this philosophy can transform the way you position yourself in the world. If you learn this art, you will never be seen the same way again. Look around you. The world has never been so noisy. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone wants to be heard. Everyone believes they need to say something all the time. Social media has turned conversations into public battles where victory is not achieved through truth, but through volume and repetition. But Nietzsche would warn us, this obsession with speaking, with responding, with shouting your position to the world is not strength, it is disguised weakness. Stop and think, why do people feel this almost compulsive need to express themselves at all times? The answer is simple. Deep down they are afraid of being irrelevant, afraid of being forgotten, afraid that their silence will be interpreted as submission. So they fill every empty space with words that they often don't even fully believe, but that are spoken to avoid the terror of insignificance. But what Nietzsche understood, and what few today may grasp, is that the one who masters silence will never be insignificant. On the contrary, they become an enigma. They become someone who cannot be easily categorized or predicted, and the unpredictable will always be more powerful than the obvious. The noise of the world is a trap. It creates the illusion that those who speak the most, who impose themselves the most, who respond the fastest, are the ones who win. But that is the logic of the weak. Nietzsche just saw life as a battlefield, and on that field, the warrior who charges into battle first is not always the one who emerges victorious. Often it is the one who knows how to wait, who observes, who perceives the enemy's flaws before attacking. Look at the true masters of strategy, whether in philosophy, war, or business. They do not speak more than they need to. They do not rush to respond. They do not wear themselves out trying to prove something to everyone. They know that sometimes the best move is to let the other tire themselves out trying to decipher them. Nietzsche did not see silence as a weakness, but as an assertion of strength. Those who master silence control the rhythm of the game. Those who remain silent at the right moment force the other to speak more than they should, to reveal their weaknesses, to expose themselves. Deep down, modern society cannot stand silence because silence forces introspection, and introspection is dangerous for those who have built their identity on external noise. So ask yourself, are you in control of your voice, or are you just another lost in the incessant noise of the world? Do you know when to speak and when to remain silent, or do you feel restless in the void of your own absence? Because if you cannot bear silence, perhaps it is telling you something you are afraid to hear. Nietzsche believed that the vast majority of people live chained to illusions, illusions about morality, about good and evil, about what is right and wrong. From a young age, we are taught to fit in, to follow rules, to respect conventions. But what if I told you that these rules were not made to strengthen you, but rather to domesticate you? The concept of the Übermensch, Nietzsche's Superman, is not about muscles, money, or status. It is about something much more powerful, absolute mastery over oneself. The Übermensch does not react impulsively, does not despair to be accepted, does not feel the need to prove anything to anyone. He creates his own values, his own rules, his own path, and one of the main weapons of this superior being is precisely silence. Think about it. What happens when you remain silent in a situation where everyone expects a response? Silence generates discomfort. It creates mystery. It reverses the power dynamic. When you refuse to react at the expected moment, you force the other person to deal with their own anxiety. Nietzsche understood that the average human being is terrified of emptiness. They need to fill everything with words, explanations, justifications. But the Übermensch understands that silence can be more powerful than any argument. See the difference between a true leader and someone who needs to shout to be heard. The true leader does not need to raise their voice. They do not need to justify themselves at every step. They exist so firmly and unwaveringly that their presence alone commands respect. Now look at those who are always talking, always trying to convince others that they are strong, intelligent, superior. Deep down, this incessant chatter is just a confession of insecurity. Nietzsche saw this difference clearly. The one who talks too much, who reacts to everything, who is bothered by every provocation, is being controlled. They are a slave to their emotions, a prisoner of external validation. But the one who knows how to be silent, who chooses their words with precision, who allows others to wear themselves out, trying to decipher them, that is the true master of the situation. The Übermensch is not affected by others' opinions. He does not need the recognition of others to exist, and for that reason, he does not wear himself out trying to prove anything. He knows that his strength does not lie in how many words he says, but in the silent impact of his presence. Now I ask you, do you have control over your words, or do your words control you? Are you the owner of your voice, or are you just reacting like a puppet to the opinions of others? Because in the end, those who truly have power never despair to be heard. Have you ever noticed how silence makes people uncomfortable? Just a small moment of pause in a conversation is enough for someone to try to fill it with words, any words, even a meaningless comment. Silence creates a vacuum, and human beings have an aversion to vacuums. They need to fill that space. They need to feel in control of the situation. But Nietzsche understood a brutal truth. Whoever controls silence controls the minds of others. Silence is a psychological weapon. It disarms, confuses, makes the other person reveal themselves without you having to move a single muscle. When someone is waiting for a response and doesn't receive one, their brain enters a state of uncertainty, desperately trying to decipher what's happening. Are you ignoring them out of disdain? Do you know something they don't? Did they say too much and not realize it? The other person's mind becomes a labyrinth of doubts, while yours remains intact. Nietzsche understood that silence can be used as a test of power. Look at the great strategists, the masters of persuasion, the leaders who have made history. They don't speak more than they need to. They make the other person wear themselves out first. They let their adversaries talk until they reveal their weaknesses. until they get lost in their own words. Silence is like a mirror. It forces the other to confront themselves, to see their own insecurity exposed. Now think of a common confrontation, a discussion between two people. Who seems to be in control? The one who gets worked up, who pours out arguments non-stop, who tries to convince the other at any cost, or the one who remains calm, who observes, who allows the other to wear themselves out alone? The first is reacting, letting themselves be carried away by emotion. The second is in control. When you remain silent, you put the other in a vulnerable position. They can interpret your silence in various ways: disinterest, disdain, superiority. But the only certainty they will have is this: you are not being controlled, and that in itself is enough to make them uneasy. Nietzsche saw silence as a reflection of inner strength. The one who can endure silence, who doesn't need to fill the void with unnecessary words, is someone who masters themselves. They don't need validation from others. They don't need to justify themselves. They don't need to prove anything, and that is exactly why they are seen as a threat. Now I ask you, how many times have you felt uncomfortable with silence? How many times have you tried to fill a moment of pause just to avoid embarrassment? And more importantly, how many times have you been manipulated by someone who knew the power of silence at the right moment? Because in the end, whoever controls silence controls the game. Silence is not just a weapon against others, it is a test against yourself, because the truth is simple. Most people cannot stand silence. They talk not because they have something important to say, but because emptiness frightens them. Nietzsche understood that to achieve true strength, you would need to face that discomfort head-on. Now think about how many times you felt compelled to explain something, to justify yourself, to fill the silence with words that deep down were unnecessary. Have you noticed that when you are silent, the people around you start to fidget? They interpret your silence as arrogance, disinterest, even as an attack. This happens because we live in a society that conditions everyone to seek constant acceptance. Remaining silent means rejecting that game, and the rejection of that game is unsettling. Nietzsche saw silence as an act of rebellion. The one who remains silent in the face of noise is saying without needing a single word, "I do not play this game. I do not need to fit in." This frightens people. They do not know how to deal with someone who does not react as expected, who does not panic to be understood. Because deep down, the desire to be understood is a form of dependence. Those who need to be understood are, in a way, asking for permission to exist. But Nietzsche's Übermensch does not ask for permission. He creates his own values regardless of others' acceptance, and this requires a kind of courage that few possess, because enduring silence means bearing the weight of loneliness. It means accepting that often no one will understand your choice. Look at the great thinkers in history, the visionaries, the revolutionaries. They were not well received immediately. Their ideas were ridiculed, ignored, fought against, but they did not need to shout to be heard. They endured the silence of misunderstanding, the silence of rejection, and continued, because truth does not need applause to exist. Now think about your own life. How many times have you felt the need to explain your choices, to prove you are right, to seek approval? And how many of those times did it really change anything? Or was your quest for explanation merely a reflection of your own fear of not being accepted? Nietzsche challenges us to go beyond that fear. He forces us to ask, are you speaking because you truly have something to say, or because you fear silence? Do you need to be understood, or are you strong enough to move on without that need? Because those who fear silence will never be truly free. Silence is not just an absence of words, it is a tool, a strategy, a game of power. But like any weapon, it needs to be used at the right moment. Nietzsche did not advocate for never speaking. He advocated for speaking only when necessary. Now think about all the conversations you've had in the last month. How many of them really mattered? How many were just noise? How many times did you find yourself explaining something that didn't need to be explained? Responding to meaningless provocations, trying to convince someone who deep down would never change their mind. How many words did you throw away just because you felt the need to fill the silence? Nietzsche saw this behavior as a form of psychological slavery. Those who talk all the time are always reacting to the world, always trying to justify their existence. But those who speak only when they want to, when they choose, when they truly decide it's worth it, they hold power, they command respect. Look at the great strategists in history. They never spoke more than necessary. They knew when to retreat, when to wait, when to remain silent so that others would reveal themselves. And when they finally spoke, their words carried immense weight because they were rare, because they were measured, because they were impossible to ignore. The problem with most people is that they speak without thinking, they react, they fall into the trap of provocation, the need to always have the last word. They don't realize that by doing this, they are becoming predictable. Nietzsche knew that unpredictability is one of the greatest weapons one can have. Those who do not react as expected become a mystery, and mystery is always more powerful than transparency. So how to apply this philosophy? How to use silence strategically? First, learn to observe before responding. Most people respond before fully understanding what is being said. They feel an almost uncontrollable urge to give an opinion, to correct, to argue. But the one who masters silence waits. They observe, they analyze, and only then do they decide if it's worth responding. Second, ask yourself, does this conversation really need me? Not every dialogue deserves your attention. Many discussions are just ego games, meaningless battles, where no one is truly interested in the truth. If the conversation adds nothing, if the other side is not willing to listen, what's the point of wasting your energy? Nietzsche would say, let them talk alone. Third, when you speak, speak with weight. If you get used to speaking less, every time you open your mouth, people will stop to listen. Your words will carry a weight that those who talk all the time will never have. You don't need to convince everyone. You just need to speak in a way that makes every word count. Because in the end, it's not about how many words you say, it's about how much impact you make. Now I ask you, do you have control over your words, or do they have control over you? Do you choose when to speak, or do you just react like a robot programmed by the need to express yourself? Nietzsche teaches us that those who speak less but speak with purpose will never be ignored. Those who master silence will never be a slave to noise. In the end, it all comes down to one question. Do you control your silence, or does your silence control you? Nietzsche saw life as a game of forces. In this game, the weak talk too much, try to justify themselves, try to convince. The strong, on the other hand, do not need approval. They understand that the need to speak all the time is just a symptom of insecurity. They know that the absence of words can carry more weight than a modge. Silence is not just an empty space, it is a reflection of who you really are. When you are silent, you force the world to see you without distractions. You reveal your true essence, and for many this is unbearable because most people build their identity based on how others react to them. But what if you took away that reaction? What if you didn't give the answer they expect? Who would you be without that need for validation? Nietzsche believed that few are ready for that answer. Few are willing to face the weight of their own silence. But those who do, those who master this art, become unshakable. Because it doesn't matter what they say about you. It doesn't matter what they think. You don't need to explain yourself. Now I want to know from you, when was the last time you remained silent when they expected you to speak? Have you noticed the impact this has on the people around you? You tell me in the comments. And if this idea made you think, if it challenged you in some way, you can't stop here. The next video will take you even deeper. No matter what you think you already know, it's essential that you watch. Watch now.